Slither's Sisters, Chapter 6. As they followed the walkway to the front door of the mansion, Robert realized the yard was completely silent. There were no sounds of cars from neighborhood streets, no lawnmowers or leaf blowers buzzing in the distance. Even the wind had fallen silent. The grounds of the mansion were deathly still. There were two large windows behind the front door, but these were blocked by tangles of tall, thorny vines. Robert tried pushing them back and immediately pricked his finger. He studied one of the windows from a distance. The drapes were open, but the glass was covered with a thick layer of grime, making it difficult to see anything inside. Yet, he did recognize a familiar shape. Look, he told Glenn, pointing. There, just inside the house, was a swirling black vortex. I don't believe it, Glenn said. You were right. As Robert and Glenn stepped aside, Karina peered through the window and frowned. Guys, wait. That's not what you think. But it was too late. Robert and Glenn were already opening the massive front door and stepping in the entrance hall. It was the sort of space that was common in old houses, with a large stone hearth, a spectacular glass chandelier, and a grand staircase leading to the second floor. Yet the hall's most impressive feature were its magnificent tapestries. There were six in all, enormous woven portraits that stretched all the way to the ceiling. One showed a giant pyramid with an eyeball floating above it, like the picture on the back of a dollar bill, except this pyramid was surrounded by men and women dressed in red tunics like ancient Romans. Another tapestry showed a large vortex at the peak of the mountain, with swarms of children ascending the mountain to reach it. With a sinking feeling, Robert realized this was the gate he'd been seeing through the window. Not a real gate, just a painting, he said. Karina scowled. If you just listened to me, you'd know that already. Have you forgotten that I spent 30 years trapped in this house? I know my way around. You can give us a tour some other time, Glenn said. I'm going back to the water. Glenn was still speaking as the hinges squealed behind him. The wooden door closed with a crash that rocked the chandelier and shook the rest of the house. He hurried over to open it, only to find that there were no doorknobs, latches, or handles, just an enormous slab of mahogany wood. What is this? Glenn asked. How are people supposed to open this? They're not. That's the point. Getting in the house is easy. Leaving is a different story. Footsteps sounded overhead, and Karina looked up to page 15. The ceiling. And here comes our host. Robert looked around the hall. There were some chairs and a table beside the hearth, but no real place to hide, and certainly nothing that could be used as a weapon. I'll break the windows, Glenn said. Desperate, he lifted a chair off the floor as if preparing to fling it through the glass. Then he froze. Sarah and Sylvia were standing on the top of the stairs. They were dressed in matching crimson gowns, just like the tunics worn by the men and women in the tapestries. Robert braced himself, preparing for the worst. He expected horns to sprout from their heads, or wings to burst from their backs, or giant tongues to emerge from their mouths. He expected the girls to come charging down the stairs, claws extended, shrieking and screaming. He certainly didn't expect them to smile. Karina, they exclaimed together. Master will be so excited to learn that you've come home, Sarah said, and you've brought boys. We need more boys, Sylvia said. Have they come to surrender their vessels? Karina blinked. Yes, that's right. Wonderful, Sarah said, clapping her hands. Master will be pleased, Sylvia agreed. The sisters bounded down the stairs, overjoyed to be welcoming guests. Glenn glanced about anxiously. What do they mean, surrender their vessels? He whispered. What are they talking about? Shh, Karina whispered back. Just play along. Sarah took Robert by the hand, leading him into the hall. You poor thing, you're dripping wet. She produced a towel out of nowhere and dabbed the slime from Robert's face and hair. How about a cup of tea? Something to warm you up? We're just about to have lunch. Let's go sit by the fire, Sylvia agreed. She was fussing over Glenn, picking bits of algae from his hair and tossing them over his shoulder. You'll be warm and toasty in no time. Robert and Glenn hesitated. The Price sisters were being so friendly it was easy to forget they had 8-inch tongues tucked behind their smiles. Great idea, Karina said. Come on, guys. The sisters spread blankets across the sofa and invited the boys to sit facing the fire. Karina sat between them. The hall's largest tapestry was directly above the hearth. It portrayed an enormous human arm growth out of the desert landscape, its massive fingers reaching toward a blazing red sky. The sisters sat in the chairs on either side of the sofa. Sarah smiled. You boys must be so excited. Robert and Glenn stared back at her. What were they supposed to say? Yes, Green answered. They're very excited. It's normal to be nervous, Sarah continued, but I assure you, boys, the surrender is completely painless. After the first decade. Sylvia quickly added. Oh, that's right, said Sarah. Some complain for a few years, but eventually everyone quiets down, and then it's smooth sailing for centuries. And what an opportunity to serve the great old ones in this way. It's really quite an honor. Glenn glanced around thoroughly confused. What do you mean serve the great old ones? By surrendering your bodies, those useless slabs of skin and hair and gristle, they allow us to walk among your peers unnoticed. What happens to us? Robert asked. Oh, don't worry, Sarah said. We have a very nice room for you downstairs. It's more of an urn, Sylvia corrected. A small urn-shaped room, Sarah said. You'll be so comfortable you'll never want to leave. Even if you could, Sylvia said. You must be so proud. Robert tried to put it all together. You're going to use our bodies as disguises while we live inside jars. You're pioneers, Sarah exclaimed. We'll possess all your classmates eventually, but you boys are among the first. Master will remember your allegiance when the Great War is over. Here, here, Sylvia cheered. Let's have some tea. She reached for a handbell on the end table and gave it 4 distinct rings. Robert glanced around the hall, desperate to find some way out of their predicament. The front door was inoperable. He had Price sisters flanking him. Even if he could get past them, he had no idea where to go. A door swung open, and in walked a stoop-backed elderly man. She carried an ancient wicker tray with a ceramic teapot and 4 small cups. As she arranged the cups on the table, Robert recognized her as Miss Lavinia, the suspicious librarian with the rickety wooden cart. But she gave no indication of recognizing Robert or Gunn. Thank you, Claudine, Sarah said. Serve the gentleman first, please. As you wish. She carried the teapot around the table, filling the cup with an oily black sludge. It smelled like a mixture of diesel fuel, and the swamp they just came from. What kind of tea is this? Glenn asked. Larval, Sylvia replied. We brew it in the greenhouse. Robert peered into his cup. Floating on the surface and staring back at him was a bulbous head with a long, skinny tail. A giant tadpole. Yuck.